Hi, I'm Steve Blank. I'm the author of The 4 Steps to the Epiphany and the Startup Owner's Manual. I'm honored to be in front of you today at the International Entrepreneurial Educators Conference. So entrepreneurship is entering its most exciting phase. We now know a lot of things we just didn't even know 2-3 years ago. And some of the biggest is that startups are not smaller versions of large companies. This is a huge idea because everything we used to do assumed that if you did it in a large company, all we were doing was replicating it on a smaller scale at an early stage venture. And as educators, that meant we were teaching what we used to teach at business school, except this time to entrepreneurs. One of the biggest changes is how we think of strategy. We used to think that startups simply needed to write a business plan. Now we understand that planning comes before the plan. One of the things we now know is that the definition of a startup is that a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a scalable and repeatable business model. That's a big idea. Search for a scalable and repeatable business model. But the question is, what's a business model? Well, as we know, academics and educators for the last 15 years have been arguing over the definition of what a business model is, and you get 2 of us in a room and you get 9 definitions. But a few years ago, Alexander Osterwalder defined business models good enough for educators and, more importantly, for entrepreneurs, gave them an actionable business model canvas that's become the standard worldwide. So the primary objective of a startup is to validate its business model hypotheses. That is, a startup is all about the search for a business model, where a large corporation is about the execution of its business model. Think about that. Search versus execution. That's the key strategy idea. That is, on a startup, the strategy is we try to validate our business model before we try to write a business plan. Yet as powerful as the business model canvas is, all it is a template for brainstorming. But there's really no action associated with it. So one of the things we came up with is, how do we actually validate and test all those hypotheses in this wonderful way to now organize our thinking about the search for the business model? And that way to do that is a process called customer development. Customer development is the search for the truth behind the business model. It consists of 4 steps: customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and company building. And when paired with the new techniques of agile development for how to build the products iteratively and incrementally, it adds a powerful new way for startups worldwide to start thinking about building products in weeks or months rather than years. And what this means as entrepreneurial educators is we need to start thinking about classes built around business model canvas and customer development. And so the process really is that we've gone from thinking that companies are organized on day one around product management, but instead to be thinking about the first process that companies need to be doing is customer and agile development, and then later hiring product managers to manage the execution of the process. The third thing that's been changing is organization. That is, how we think about startups, who we hire and when. When we used to think of startups as a smaller version of a large company, all we did was look at large corporations and said, well, they have a VP of sales, we need a VP of sales. They have a VP of marketing, we need a VP of marketing. We now know that the search for a business model is actually done by different people. It's in fact done by people who are comfortable in keeping one idea in their head on Monday and then completely flipping to something different on Tuesday and Wednesday. Because what you're searching for is something repeatable and scalable, but not till you find that can you hire executives who know how to execute that repeatability. And it's the very rare individual who's actually been running a 3,000 person organization in a large company that's comfortable in the chaos of a startup. So for organization for early stage ventures, what we say is what a startup needs to do is build a customer development team first as the unit that's searching for the business model, which consists of founders and a team of either engineers or salespeople or whatever in a new role. So what we want to have is a new organization dedicated to actually finding customers and, more importantly, This team, which consists mostly of the founders, is the only group that can make the strategic decisions to change what the products or features or customer segments are. And then once we found that business model, then we build the silos around our organization that allow us to build sales, marketing, and biz dev departments. So as educators and listening to this, the first thing is, well, that's great. Thanks for the strategy, but why should I care? How does it impact me? And how does it impact the classes I teach and the students I graduate? And here's the idea. It's either a good idea or a bad idea, but it's an interesting idea. Is that for the last decade or so, what we've been doing as entrepreneurial educators is teaching our best students how to write a business plan. But what we now know is that no business plan survives first contact with customers. So while business plans make all the sense in the world in an existing company and larger organizations where they actually understand who their customers are, understand their pricing, understand competitors. In a startup, it's all about a series of unknowns. So what we really want to think about is how do we teach a curriculum based on the search for the business model rather than its execution? And that requires a lot of new thinking. Some of the things we've offered to Stanford and Berkeley and Columbia, Caltech, where I've been teaching, is that we've come up with a new series of classes called the Lean Launchpad that offer an experiential entrepreneurial education and a different curriculum. So at your schools, you might want to be thinking about what classes and curriculum do we need to change to actually embrace the search for the business model rather than its execution. One last thought, some of the experiments we've been running is how to actually embrace what really goes on in entrepreneurship. As you know, startups and new ventures are a full contact, full body sport. They just don't occur in the classroom or in an office. They actually occur outside the building. And so we've tried to make as many of these classes as we can experiential and hands-on. And some of the techniques are embodied in the Lean Launchpad class, but they include completely flipping the classroom by recording the lectures on an online service like Udacity and using the time for the class to actually answer questions about the lectures. The other things we do is actually make these team-based projects where they actually start companies during the class and we critique them. So at this conference, the challenge to you is how are you going to deal with these emergent ideas and challenges? And the question is, what's next?